tonight. The tax reform battle takes shape, Amazon's hiring spree, and March of the Micronations.
My name is Dr. Eric Liss. I am the unquestioned tyrannical dictator of the American Empire.
The number of people who voted in Sunday's controversial Venezuelan election was tampered with, according to the company that provided voting machines. The government said more than 8 million people voted.
We estimate the difference between the actual participation and the one announced by the authorities is at least 1 million votes.
The opposition is calling for a criminal investigation.
Y nadie puede decir a ciencia cierta que esa gente que está allí juramentándose fue la que ganó o fue simplemente producto de una trampa.
Thousands of Syrian refugees, along with fighters of a former al-Qaeda affiliate group, left Lebanon by bus today, headed for rebel-held territory in Syria. Their exit from Lebanon is part of a ceasefire deal between the jihadists and Hezbollah. The two sides also agreed to a prisoner swap. Last week, Hezbollah and the Syrian army launched an offensive to drive the jihadists out of the area. Today is this year's Earth Overshoot Day, which marks the date where humankind has used up more natural resources than our planet is able to renew in the entire year, and it arrived earlier than it ever has before. Keeping pace with the current global demand on nature would now take the equivalent of 1.7 Earths. But if everyone lived the average American lifestyle, we'd need the eco-resources of 5 Earths. President Trump signed a bipartisan bill levying new sanctions against Russia, Iran, and North Korea, and his reaction to it was personal. In one of 2 written White House statements addressing the bill, Trump said, quote, "I built a truly great company worth many billions of dollars. That is a big part of the reason I was elected. As president, I can make far better deals with foreign countries than Congress." President Trump endorsed a new Senate bill aimed at cutting legal immigration levels in half over the next decade. Many of those affected would come from the pool of people entering the country through family ties. The president said the process would favor applicants who speak English and who can financially support themselves and their families.
It looks like you're trying to engineer the racial and ethnic flow of people into this country.
Jim, that is one of the most outrageous, insulting, ignorant, and foolish things you've ever said, and for you that's still a really... The notion that you think that this is a racist bill is so wrong and so insulting.
The bill has very little chance of passing in its current form. It's been a brutal summer for the U.S. Congress, and fall isn't shaping up to be much better. Republicans will have to strike deals on raising the debt ceiling and keeping the government funded before the end of September. Only then can they move on to their real priority, tax reform, where any hope of bipartisan cooperation has already vanished.
Yesterday, Senate Democrats released a letter with their demands for tax reform. Don't cut taxes for the rich and don't increase the deficit. In response, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said that he plans to do tax reform through reconciliation, which lets him pass something with 51 votes instead of 60.
We will need to use reconciliation because we have been informed by a majority of the Democrats in a letter I just received today that most of the principles that would get the country growing again, they're not interested in addressing. So
this is the same legislative backdoor that Republicans tried to use for health care. It's a way to pass legislation without any Democratic support. And they won't get it. Democrats have already told McConnell that if he uses reconciliation, they're out, no matter what else is in the bill. So for now, at least, this is a one-party game. But it's still going to be really hard to get done. In order for reconciliation to work, first there has to be a budget resolution. Specific language in the budget would greenlight using reconciliation for the tax plan. But that greenlight isn't operative until the budget is passed. And the GOP majority hasn't done that yet. Assuming that gets done, they'd need to agree on the details of tax reform itself. You may have noticed that through this whole discussion about taxes, you haven't heard any actual numbers. That's because the GOP isn't even there yet. Figuring out how to change rates is incredibly hard, which is why Congress hasn't passed any major tax reform since 1986. That legislation reduced the number of tax brackets and lowered tax rates for top earners, from 50% to 38.5%. It paid for all that by taxing corporations and closing loopholes. Even top administration officials aren't all on the same page on reform. Last week, Steve Bannon reportedly floated a hike in the tax rate on those who make more than $5 million to 44%. But days later, the White House legislative director came out and said that was totally off the table.
We don't believe that raising taxes is the way to encourage growth. We believe that lowering taxes, particularly among job creators, is the best way to get the economy going.
That proposal doesn't raise a lot of money anyway. The Tax Policy Center analyzed a similar proposal by Hillary Clinton during the campaign and found it would only bring in about $126 billion over 10 years, not nearly enough to offset all the other tax cuts Republicans want. As the GOP factions in the two chambers in the White House bicker over what a package will look like, the longer this will take, and the more opportunity Democrats will have to make any reform politically toxic for targeted Republicans.
Vice President Mike Pence was in Montenegro today, the latest stop in a tour of reassurance for Baltic states unnerved by increasing Russian aggression. Montenegro, a country of just 600,000, could use the support. Its Prime Minister, Duško Marković, was famously shoved aside at a recent NATO summit by President Trump, who all but denounced the new round of sanctions against Russia today. When Montenegro officially joined NATO in June, Russia was furious. And now, Moscow appears to be punishing the tiny country with a poisonous smear campaign. Plantage Vineyard is the largest wine producer in Montenegro, making 17 million bottles a year. Until recently, Russia was among its biggest export markets. But that changed in the weeks before Montenegro joined NATO, when Russian regulators suddenly declared Montenegrin wines contaminated.
Черногорские вина в ближайшее время исчезнут из российских магазинов. Роспотребнадзор ввел запрет на импорт алкогольной продукции одного из крупнейших балканских производителей.
Oni su navodno pronašli određene nedostatke u vinu kao što su ostaci plastike i pesticida. Postoji već 55 godina I nikad u istoriji taj slučaj nije zabilježen.
And reports started warning Russian tourists about visiting Montenegro, calling it dangerous and crime-ridden. By any measure, Montenegro's military is tiny, with fewer than 2,000 active personnel. But it had been Russia's last hope for access to the Adriatic Sea. And Moscow doesn't like what it sees as a Western incursion into its sphere of influence.
Нет, зачем-то нужно постоянно расширять инфраструктуру НАТО, двигаться к российским границам. Кто угрожает Черногории? То есть, понимаете, абсолютно наплевательское отношение к нашей позиции.
Moscow is even suspected of sending 2 agents to stop Montenegro from joining NATO by assassinating the prime minister. Mike Pence's invitation to Montenegro and its neighbors will likely enrage Moscow even more.
We truly believe the future of the Western Balkans is in the West, and we look forward to reaffirming the commitment of the United States to build the relationships that will strengthen the ties between the European community, the Western Balkans, and the United States of America.
Plantage Vineyard has appealed to a Russian court to overturn the wine ban, but there have already been numerous delays, and their odds of succeeding just got longer. Franken is a Democratic senator from Minnesota. He's also a sharp-witted political satirist who honed his craft on the set of Saturday Night Live. For his entire first term, Franken kept these identities separate, but in his new book, he's merging them.
I wonder if I should tell this joke. This is a Buddy Hackett joke, okay? So, guy goes into a doctor's office. He's got a dot on his forehead. The doctor says, well, in 6 weeks, you're going to have a penis growing out of your forehead. And the guy said, so, doctor, what you're telling me is that when I get up in the morning and look in the mirror, I'm going to see a penis growing out of my forehead? The doctor says, no. You won't see it. The balls will cover your eyes.
Franken's funny is officially out of retirement. In California, progressives are really happy to see it.
I don't have a lot of heroes, Al, but you're one of them.
No, thank you.
Keep fighting for us, man.
I will.
Thank you.
It's like being on the rock tour. People are lining up for a long time to get in to see you. Is that happening because you're Senator Al Franken or because you're sort of noted author, comedian, and satirist Al Franken?
I think it's a whole package.
Yeah.
It's odd. You know, there
Is it still odd? I mean, you've been this person for a long time.
No, it's not odd to me.
The book tells the story of a comedian struggling to keep his mouth shut.
I give up. You know,
But it also tells the story of an outside agitator who works to become a member of the Democratic establishment. Franken was elected in 2008 by the smallest margin in Senate history.
Well, it was close. But we won.
It was a brutal campaign. Republicans and even some Democrats warned that his career as a comedian meant Franken wasn't serious enough for the Senate.
I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and doggone it, people like me.
This story of your campaign was about this. Okay, this guy's coarse. He's just a comedian. He doesn't understand the decorum.
Yeah.
How serious the Senate is.
He's going to embarrass the people of Minnesota.
Franken listened to his critics. He became a boring policy wonk.
I rise today to express my support for Senator Mikulski's amendment for women's health.
He didn't talk to national reporters. And in 2014, he won re-election by a large margin.
Thank you for giving me the chance to keep working for you in Washington.
People wondered if he'd ever be funny again. It turns out Franken was being funny the whole time. He writes that behind the scenes, he used jokes to make friends, many of them Republicans.
There are people of goodwill who have different systems of belief that you can find common ground with and that you just have to. You know, there's no one on the Senate floor that when I look at him, I go, oh. Even Ted and Cruz.
Well, surely you guys don't get along super well.
No, but I probably like him more than most of my colleagues like him.
And you don't like him.
And I hate him, but...
We no longer think it's weird for entertainers with no political experience to convince voters they're serious to run for office. And the efforts to actively hide Franken's funny are almost quaint now.
Well, now we've got, the tweet of the day and everything else that happens. I mean, all the things that people were warned about with you that you didn't do have now been done by somebody else. Does that, I don't know, how do you feel about that?
Well, of course, that hasn't been lost on me.
Uh-huh.
You know, and the irony of, people were scandalized by a joke that I had written in 1978.
But here's what makes Franken different. While the rest of those guys talk about how politics won't change them, Franken is proud of becoming a Washington insider. So the funny is back, but it's different.
It is my great pleasure to introduce Al Franken and Mark Maron.
There are things liberal comedians will say that he won't.
You work with these, I want to be diplomatic. You work with these monsters. And you're in the Senate. You're Mitch McConnell. You see him. You say hi.
He's not a monster.
I apologize.
He's done some bad things.
And a large part of your book is moving away from being a person who kind of didn't take any shit to a person who understood at what points you have to take shit to get things done that you want to get done.
It is usually the reverse, which is like, I don't want to take advice from political consultants, and I'm authentic, and
exactly.
that's the thing. And the thing is that you get changed. It's unavoidable, and it's in order to get things done. It's in order to, you have to compromise with people, sometimes.
Al Franken, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, you, sir.
Keep fighting a good fight, buddy.
Today, Amazon held one of the largest single-day hiring events in American history. hoping to make 50,000 job offers in a span of only a few hours. It's another sign of its growing dominance of the retail business. Meanwhile, traditional retailers are in free fall. That shift from brick-and-mortar stores to e-commerce is often seen as a bad trade-off. But what if that's not the case?
The bigger Amazon gets, the more everyone worries about the so-called retail apocalypse, which has already seen 9 retailers go bankrupt this year. And chains like JCPenney's, Macy's, and Sears shut down hundreds of stores. The retail industry employs hundreds of thousands of Americans, many of them with only a high school degree. And e-commerce, by definition, threatens many of those jobs. But what if the death of these traditional storefronts and shopping malls is actually something we should be celebrating? What if the rise of e-commerce has actually left American workers better off? Michael Mandel, an economist at the Progressive Policy Institute, started asking those questions last year. And the answers he's found might surprise you.
Really what's going on is that this has become a job creator, because it turns out that if people are willing to shop online, if they can get the stuff quickly, and getting the stuff quickly means that you have to have fulfillment centers located near every large city. Since the peak of the last business cycle in December 2007, the number of total e-commerce jobs has risen by about 400,000, much more than the 140,000 jobs that have been lost in brick-and-mortar retail.
These jobs, however many of them there might be, are traditionally thought of as poor-paying temporary gigs with awful working conditions. The gigs are tougher and tend to be more physically demanding. But Mandel finds that e-commerce jobs pay 31% more on average than their brick-and-mortar retail counterparts. And unlike traditional retail, are usually full-time positions with benefits.
This is a case where technology is creating jobs for people with a high school education that pay decent wages for their area. Honestly, I view this as a potential harbinger of economic spring, that in fact it turns out that technology economy can produce jobs for people who are not software developers. The only people it's not good news for is the shopping mall owners who find themselves in possession of real estate that may not be worth as much as it was before.
It's hard to argue with Mandel on a day when Amazon is ready to hire 50,000 new workers. But he may be underestimating the longer-term impacts of automation. E-commerce is built on productivity, and humans will never be as productive as robots. They're also much easier to replace when they're working out of sight in a warehouse, instead of at the front of a store.
I am President Kevin Baugh of the Republic of Molossia.
I am King George II, current ruler of Slobovia and one of the founding members.
My name is Dr. Eric Liss. I am the unquestioned tyrannical dictator of the Arakan Empire.
If you don't remember any of these countries from geography class, you're not alone. They're all micronations, self-declared sovereign states not formally recognized by the countries in which they reside.
Thank you.
This summer, representatives from 27 micronations gathered for a summit in Dunwoody, Georgia.
Say micronation.
Our governing philosophy is absolute monarchy based upon divine right theory. And I have over 200 citizens who tend to agree with it. I don't think it makes us exactly a cult, but... Jean-Pierre.
Oh.
You're the new lieutenant? I love your outfit. That one's wonderful. I can give the tour of the house if anybody wants it. Ruritania is, and all micronations for that matter, are more of a political statement than an ideology. We don't care for the way things are going in the countries we come from. And we think we could do a better job, even if it's just over a postage stamp-sized piece of property.
Micronations came to prominence in the 1960s, when two man-made islands declared their independence: the Republic of Rose Island, off the coast of Italy, and Sealand, off the coast of the UK. The Italian government did not take kindly to Rose Island, and in 1968, they sent forces who demolished it with explosives. Sealand fared better, surviving a hostage situation and legal troubles ranging from passport fraud to money laundering. Other micronations were founded with a wide variety of goals, including establishing a libertarian utopia, creating a matriarchal BDSM state, and circumventing drug laws. Many of these had less than ideal outcomes. However, the majority went unnoticed by society until the 90s, when previously isolated micronationalists realized they weren't alone.
I wasn't even aware that there were other micronations out there until the advent of the internet. You know, you get out there and start looking around like, whoa, that guy's got his own country, he declared. That guy's got his own country.
Your Majesties, Your Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen.
My country is an anti-state.
We now consider ourselves to be a classical republic.
Money. What is it anyway?
Mauritania has had a long tradition against the vile vermin of squirrels.
Most of my citizens never even meet me. They send in the application. I approve it. We also get a lot of people trying desperately to leave third world countries. They think that we're a country with enough land that they could move here. We can give them a citizenship, but it comes without residency.
There are absolutely no tangible benefits to being a member of the American Empire. It is purely something that someone can be happy about. Naturally, we do sell banknotes and coins and printable passports and citizenship certificates, but really it's not a question of tangible benefit, it's a question of just belonging. And when you get right down to it, that's really one of the most powerful things in the world.
Our land claim is actually only the size of a small rock. It's right here in this box, and it weighs roughly about 2 pounds.
Many micronationalists are not isolationists. They also want to shape the world around them and question what makes a state legitimate. For them, even small acts of rebellion help challenge bureaucracies and give them control over their own lives.
Some people describe it as role-playing. Micronations actually hate that. This is more of a lifestyle.
And in special recognition of your services, my special gift to you.
I am honored. My husband was an invalid for a number of years. He came up with laws and rules that we still use. When he passed away, we got about 100 condolence letters from other micronations. I spent 10 years being a caregiver. Suddenly, I didn't know what to do with myself. This fills my time. Thank you. When I'm not being the queen, I'm being what other people want me to be. When I'm being the queen, I'm who I want to be.
That's Vice News Tonight for Wednesday, August 2nd.